Hello, everyone, and why am I wearing headphones? I don't have anybody to listen to except myself, but I had headphones on, so what do I know? Hope everyone's having a good weekend. If you can't tell, I'm not doing this by script or by routine, as Lords of the Night might be. So I thought I came across this article, and the article link is in the description. So if you have a second, go down to the description, click the link to the article. And granted, you haven't looked at least 3 New York Times articles yet this month, you should be able to see it. And you can follow along as I'm about to proceed. Um, I saw this article and I read through it and I thought maybe I should do a video on this. But when it comes to articles and something that's relatively static, it doesn't make for that interesting of a video, in my opinion. Some people have a talent for that. I don't know that I do. So I thought it might be more economical if I just did a quick live stream to read the article and give my comments as we go. Before we get that, though, I want to say hi to everybody in the chat. Probably won't get everyone's name, but I'll get as many as I can. Tall Person, hello. Ezoob, Point Curation, Thoughts from the Dryer, Ryan Rollins, who else? Chadwick Dupree, Zombie Teddy, Ethan Long, and Jean. Hello. So as the title would suggest, this is technically an entry in my Curriculum of Fear series. And for those of you who may not have seen those other videos, there's a playlist on my channel. But in short, it's a series that focuses specifically on examples of, well, I guess educational curriculums that are concerning. Either philosophies on teaching social justice, or encouraging activism, or encouraging things that aren't so much educational as they are emotional, which is, well, as the article we're about to look over will, I think, give some evidence that it's not necessarily the healthiest idea to promote feels over reals, as the kids do say. So let's just get right into it, shall we? So I'm going to open up the article here. I've got it in a separate window so I can still see chat in the meantime. But if you'd like to follow along, again, the link is in the description. So this was posted just today, March 3rd. And the headline reads, "As enrollment slips, alternative colleges ask, is there room for us?" Now that's a bit of a misleading headline because the actual headline should be something to the effect of, do progressive schools actually pay off in the world of work? Something to that effect. I'm not a journalist, as you might have noticed. Oh, and tailed features in the chat, fucking me, or Goldthrapple in various forms. Speaking of education, you should go check out Tailed Features' channel. He just did a video, a collaborative video today regarding education in Scotland. And if you'd like to know a bit more about education in Scotland, at least via Tailed's perspective, there is a show I did called Familiar with the Matter, my very first episode of that, featuring Tailed Feature, also on my channel. But that aside, here's the article by, and I'm going to screw up this name. It sounds like the name of the Latin name of a flower or something, actually. Anemona horticulus. Doesn't that sound like a flower if you had to look it up in a textbook? Amherst, Massachusetts. The office of the Hampshire College president, Miriam Nelson, looked as if she were hosting a big sleepover earlier this month, with sleeping bags everywhere and students sprawled in chairs using laptops, their towels hanging in the president's private bathroom. But Dr. Nelson and her staff had long left the premises. The students who had taken over her office were a conscious throwback to the activism of the 1960s, when Hampshire was conceived as an experiment in higher education. Now they were fighting for its survival in a different time, and it was not looking good. The college announced in January that it was facing, quote, tough financial trends and was looking for a partner to stay afloat. Quote, Hampshire's next set of moves will be to set a precedent for the future of experimental education, the students wrote in a manifesto demanding more participation in charting the college's future. Quote, we want to believe that you share our radical communal ideas, unquote. Okay, now, as we'll see, radical communal ideas were essentially the backbone of this college up through to this point where it is starting to fail. And what are the, and I use the term loosely, students demanding? Well, they want to double down on that notion, assumingly to higher extremes than were previously present. Let's see who else is in the chat. Angela Arriaga, hello, Angela. Hello, Rambler. Hello, Pincalo, the Driving Ape Man. Beth Castleman, hello. Joys of Sorrow, hello. Diesel Dave, hello. Your boy Pat, hello. Hello, hello, hello. Thoughts from the dryer. I think I might have said hello to you previously, but if I did, you got double. Let's see. So, founded in 1965 and open to students 5 years later, Hampshire, a liberal arts college in Western Massachusetts, is an embodiment of the progressive education principles that arose from the spirit of individualism and self-expressionism. Sorry, self-expressionism. It's not an art form. Self-expression of that era. There are no grades, only narrative assessments, and there are no prescribed majors. Students design their own courses of study. Are you getting the picture? Okay. This is you're setting these kids up for failure. Okay. You know, many jokes are made on Lords of the Night about how I stick to format because structure, especially in education, is necessary. But this philosophy is just open the doors and trust the children to teach themselves effectively. We see this more and more in several of the TEDx talks that I've done that regard education or dealing with the development of children or something. They will say something to the effect of, you know, the wisdom of a 9-year-old, trust in the wisdom of the children, et cetera, et cetera. No, children do not have wisdom. They have emotions and they have reactions. Wisdom does not come without experience, and then applying that experience to similar situations that you've already encountered. That's what wisdom is. Children don't have that. Not to any extent an adult could trust anyway. But I might be getting ahead of myself. Let's see. Hampshire and a few dozen other schools founded on similar principles were once the cutting edge of academia. But now, families facing facing sky-high tuitions are looking for a more direct link between college and career, college officials say. As a result, many of these small experimental schools are being forced to re-examine their missions, merge with more traditional institutions, or, in some cases, shut down. Quote, "What I see happening under the aegis of financial responsibility is a purging of colleges that serve unconventional students," unquote, said Eva Marie Swidler, a faculty member at Goddard College, an alternative college in Plainfield, Vermont. Quote, "What this purge leaves behind is a system of higher education even more focused on either training only the elites in the liberal arts or training everyone else as obedient workers for a corporate workforce," unquote. Now, there's something that she said there that I want to be remembered as we proceed. She's complaining that by, quote unquote, purging these small experimental schools, all you leave are training only the elites in the liberal arts. Okay. Only the elites. So remember that phrase when she's complaining about what her college represents, or sorry, what not her college represents, what the other colleges represent as compared to hers and schools like hers, which are disappearing. The problems facing alternative colleges, I can't read today. The problems alternative colleges face, somehow my brain decided to jump ahead of itself and replace words. I might be CNN today. Point to a larger crisis in higher education, a shrinking college-age population, especially in the Northeast and Upper Midwest, where many of these institutions are clustered. But they are also confronting a growing skepticism of the liberal arts, often a focus of non-traditional programs, and a desire for higher return on investment. Right. Is anything you're being taught in one of these colleges actually applicable to the working world? Can you expect some kind of monetary gain from whatever you've quote unquote learned at an unconventional school? It's called practicality, pragmatism. That's why trade schools are probably a better bet these days. Okay. Tuition, room, and board at Hampshire College is more than $63,000 a year, which is typical for elite private colleges. Now, remember our previous educator's complaint about what people would be forced to do if their smaller colleges were purged. They'd have to, it would only leave for the elite liberal arts. Well, what do you call something like $63,000 a year? That's not elite? Or shouldn't it be considered elite if you're paying that much money for an education? I mean, holy cats. And in parentheses, many of the 1,100 or so Hampshire students, down from 1,400 5 years ago, received significant financial aid. Right. And how much of that financial aid is debt? Debt that they'll be paying off for years and years afterwards. Debt that will not be mitigated, likely, by any quote-unquote career that their education would have prepared them for in this super expensive, elite, private, unconventional school. In 1970, tuition, room, and board at private four-year colleges and universities was about $3,000 a year, or about $20,000 adjusted for inflation, according to federal statistics. $63,000 versus $20,000. And what are you getting for your money? Well, I don't know. Dr. Nelson, who has been threatened with a vote of no confidence from the faculty, said Hampshire was negotiating with potential partners, but declined to reveal details. Goddard is struggling to raise $1.4 million to keep going. Green Mountain College, an environmentally focused college in Pulteney, if I'm saying that correctly, Vermont, has announced that it will close at the end of the spring semester after failing to attract enough students to keep going. The pace of shutdowns and mergers among small colleges in general, those with enrollment of about 1,500 full-time students, has edged up, according to Moody's Investors Service, with 1 in 5, quote, under fundamental stress, unquote. Now, I'm not much of an economist, but, sometimes the market sends you some signals as to the reality and efficacy of what you're teaching, or I should say what your product is. Let's see. The result is an almost Darwinian competition as more resilient colleges snap up the cast-offs from the struggling ones. Prescott College, founded in the 1960s in central Arizona, posted a prominent message on its website, quote, "Welcome Green Mountain College students," unquote, urging them to transfer. On January 18th, soon after the deadline for many college applications, Hampshire sent a letter to students who had already been admitted, inviting them to apply to at least 10 liberal arts colleges in the Northeast, including Bates, Bennington, Sarah Lawrence, and Skidmore, that had extended deadlines and would give them special consideration. Some alternative colleges have had to think in more practical terms and evolve. And here's the big one, quote, "A recurring question is, how are you preparing our children for the world," unquote, said Melvin Jules Bouquet, a writing professor at Sarah Lawrence in Yonkers, New York. Well, I'll tell you, Melvin Jules Bouquet, an English degree doesn't prepare you for much. I can speak from experience. The most an English degree basically says to a potential employer is that I can work towards a goal. This is evidence that I put my mind to something and I achieved a goal. Of course, an English degree isn't exactly rocket science by any measure, but it's something. It's also a default if you have absolutely no idea what you're going to do with yourself, as I did. Unless you're doing something very specialized or you're exceedingly talented. having anything other than a business degree at minimum or some kind of technical degree doesn't really prepare you for much of anything. Now, in my case, I was kind of a jack of all trades, and I didn't have some big goal in mind that I was dying to get into as an industry or as a career, so I couldn't really be disappointed in where I ended up. And I've done fairly well for myself regardless. But if I was paying $63,000 a year and or taking on such debt as would be accrued by trying to do a 4-year college run at $63,000 a year, one would hope that I'm leaving that place with something pretty valuable to take out into the world. And yet, go into the chat real quick. Let's see. Renovation says, we don't have sky-high fees here in Ireland, and the only reason the taxpayer-funded education budget has shot up is demand for higher pay and staffing levels by the 100% left-wing administration and educators. Yeah, the situation in UK schools, even, just the slice of it that I know a little bit about now, thanks to Tailed Feature, scares me. It's a very scary situation. I feel lucky, honestly, that I graduated college when I did in the early 2000s. I dodged the proverbial bullet when it comes to the influx of social justice education and emotional hug box sort of academia, if you want to call it that. Thinking back, there were, I guess, maybe there were hints of that going on at the time that I graduated or thereabouts, but not so much as you would notice, especially not like in the last 5 or 6 years, especially. Zero the Hero 99. What school did you go to, Scribe? Hard Knocks. That's where I went to. Can't you tell from my rough and tumble vocal talents or something? Anyway, let's see. Back to the article. So the question is, how are you preparing our children for the world? Professor Bouquet, I don't know how to say it. I'm going to say that because that's what it seems like it is. Professor Bouquet, who was an undergraduate at Sarah Lawrence in the 1970s, said the college, perhaps best known for its arts and humanities offerings, has changed in concrete ways. It has strengthened its math and science programs, Professor Bouquet said, and in 2015 became a full member of the NCAA. Quote, when I was there, the only athletics was sitting on the swings and taking drugs, he joked. Yeah, great. So now you've had to set that aside. It's like reality is dawning. It's only taken like 40 years to get there. The school's approach to grades has also changed. In the past, students received written evaluations from their professors, but letter grades did not appear on them. Quote, the thinking was if you gave them a full page of coherent thought and a grade at the bottom, all eyes would immediately go to the grade and they wouldn't read their evaluations, unquote. Now, I might be cynical, might being the operative word, but something about that arrangement tells me that the professors really wanted the students to read their glowing critiques of their work rather than setting a firm bar of achievement or not achievement, as it were. Now, I've had different things in my schooling career. I've had people, teachers who like wrote little summaries of things like I'd turn in a paper and they'd write, a paragraph or two giving me feedback and then a grade at the bottom. And I read the whole thing because I'm a responsible student. What you expect of students to do, well, why don't you leave that up to them? I mean, if you have constructive feedback to give a student on a paper, on a midterm, something like that, go ahead right away, as in WRITE, right away. But put the grade there. Let them know whether or not they hit the mark. And if they didn't, they can look to your comments to see what it is they have to improve on. If they choose to ignore what you have to say and just take the C for taking the C, well, surprise, surprise, they will reap the benefit of their own apathy. And that's on them. Put the responsibility on the student. God forbid. to do what they're supposed to do to pass the class. Do not put the responsibility of the student to determine the quality of the education, as in some of these private schools. It's like, make your own major. I remember hearing that when I was very young. I think it was in elementary school when I saw a TV show or a news program or something that was talking about how you could make your own major. And there was some guy who had decided to major in, I shit you not. If I'm remembering this incorrectly, it's just because of the years gone by. But I swear to God, he said something to the effect of, I'm majoring in skateboarding or something like that. And at the time when you're, dumb kid, I thought, oh my God, that'd be so cool. You could get through college by skateboarding. Wow. I didn't have any concept at the time, obviously, of just how stupid an idea that was, unless you were like a Tony Hawk type athlete, obviously. But then you don't need a college degree to become a Tony Hawk. So, especially not a college degree in skateboarding. But anyway, take a drink here. All right. So, excuse me. Now, students still receive evaluations, but they can look up their grades online. Oh, okay. So they're still not actually on the paper. Great. The very concept of non-traditional colleges has also evolved. Decades ago, they were places like Hampshire, small bucolic campuses where grades were scarce and business majors were scarcer. Now they might be online or serve older students. They often have clear vocational ends and use the mantra, quote, lifelong learners, unquote. Well, that sounds like a recurring revenue stream for a college, doesn't it? But I'm not being cynical. Arguing that people who have to retool their skills several times over their working lives to keep up with the changing demands of technology. Quote, there are online institutions spending 10 to 20 times the amount of money of some of us in digital marketing, unquote, said Bernard Bull, the president of Goddard. Goddard College has historically attracted students who, quote, can't stomach the grind of prescribed courses, a syllabus, textbooks, Professor Swidler said. It is a low residency college, meaning that students gather on campus periodically, but mainly to do their work from home and send it to their professors. There is a notable contingent of homeschooling parents and children among them, Professor Swidler said. You know what college also taught me? Being sort of like out on my own for the first time, not having my parents there to sort of drive me to school and everything else. It taught me how to be punctual, to get up at a time that might not be desirable, but was necessary for me to go and get the job done that I was there to do. Teaches you things like that. Teaches you things like, sort of the ground level ideas of a good work ethic. Just show up when you want. Just email me your thing. It's fine. You don't have to show up. You don't have to, our expectations are so low. You'd have to trip over a log or something to have a problem with this. That's what this tells me, and maybe I'm just being a cranky old man at this point, but holy cats. I mean, don't get me wrong. I tried to do as little as was absolutely necessary of me to get through some classes. Some classes I didn't care about. They were electives or they were prerequisites for something else that I was interested in. And so, I was not any kind of straight A student. I didn't do bad. Don't get me wrong. I was in I got like a 3.7 or something by the end of my college career or whatever. So not awful. But again, I was in, English major. So what are you going to do? But at the same time, I'm not speaking from a position of, I was a stalwart student and you should do this and you should do that. No, I don't think education should be a mind killer. I don't think it should necessarily be something that makes you turned off to the world to be stressful. At the same time, though, it shouldn't be a lack of challenge. One of the comments that always came up when I went to my community college before I went to my 4-year college was that it was effectively high school too, because in one sense, you were seeing a lot of the same people at the community college that you saw at high school because you're all local, but also because the difficulty and the structure was so very much just a little bit beyond high school. When I was growing up and I saw movies where kids were going to college and things like that, it was always these very the stereotypical grim-faced professor in the lecture hall, and all the equations on the blackboard, and all the midterms, and all the stress and everything else. I thought college was going to be an absolute hell. Like it would just stress me so much out so much because my brain would just be exploding trying to remember all this stuff and have these really high concepts I'd have to push into my brain, and all the tests and the midterms. And part of me was happy to find out, at least in my case, that wasn't so. But by the time I got to my 4-year college, I started to understand why I was regretting not having done advanced placement, or running start, as it's called some places. That's my one biggest regret, is that I hadn't done running start, because I was, and this isn't gloating or anything, I was always a relatively smart kid, and in a lot of cases I was operating a bit ahead of what the material I was being given in a lot of my classes. But I was also lazy to a certain extent. But like I say, looking back, I wish I'd gone advanced placement. Not only would I have gotten high school stuff taken care of and started accruing college credit, but I would have saved my parents so much money over the course of time if I'd just done that. So I encourage anybody who's in the situation I was in then, or if you have kids who are coming up on that situation, if at all possible, if there is a running start or an advanced placement program for anything, take advantage of it. It will be worth it in the long run. This has been a public service announcement from Scribe. Moving on. Okay, so I want to back up a little bit because the next paragraph is very poignant, I think, given what we've seen in colleges the last couple of years. So backing up to the previous paragraph, Goddard College has historically attracted students who, quote, can't stomach the grind of prescribed courses, a syllabus, or textbooks, Professor Swidler said. It is a low residency college, meaning that students gather on campus periodically, but mainly do their work from home and send it to their professors. There is a notable contingent of homeschooling parents and children among them, Professor Swidler said. Quote, a lot of them, I would call them activists, unquote, she added. Excuse me. Quote, they're people who have some pretty deep questions about the way things are set up, therefore questions about the way education is set up as well, unquote. Activists. Yes, that is what colleges are producing more and more of lately, and actively, no pun intended, encouraging them. I can point you to a few videos I've done covering teachers and institutions who are explicitly, not even being covert about it, explicitly saying that they are trying to train activists. They are trying to create change makers, or any other euphemism you might come up with for social activist. Yeah. That attitude is perhaps not the most conducive to fundraising, you think, training activists? Many alternative colleges depend mainly on tuition for their operating budgets. At Hampshire, only 22% of alumni give to the college officials said. Well, that gives you an idea of how much faith and how appreciative people who have graduated from that college think of that college. Probably because they're swimming in debt they can't repay, but that's just a guess on my part. As the students sit in at Hampshire, let me try that again. As the students sit in at Hampshire enters its 5th full week, alumni are scrambling to raise cash to buy time until a permanent solution can be found. Layoffs have begun in the admissions and fundraising departments and are expected to reach the faculty after spring semester. The college decided not to admit a full class of 300 students this fall. Only about 77 students who were admitted as early decision applicants or had deferred admission. Many faculty fear that such measures put the college on a path toward closing that cannot be reversed. Prospective students like Ben Smith are bailing out. Mr. Smith, generic enough, a high school senior from a suburb of Washington, D.C., was accepted early to Hampshire. He has decided to go to the University of Puget Sound in Tacoma, Washington. See, I pronounced Puget right. Somebody corrected me a while back. I kept saying like Puget or something. I forget who it was, but somebody told me Puget. After Hampshire sent him a contract saying that traditional first-year housing would not be available, study abroad programs might not be offered, faculty members could be cut, and, to top it all off, he was only guaranteed enrollment for 1 semester. What a deal. Can you imagine having a contract sent to you from a college that says, yeah, 50% of the stuff that we have might not be available. Also, you might have a teacher one day and not the next. And also, we can only have you here for 1 semester. Oh, no housing, by the way, no housing. Before deciding on Puget Sound, Mr. Smith did one thing he never would have done before. He checked the size of its endowment. Well, first and foremost, that is not a bad idea. Research your college before you go there. Make sure that it's not going to close down on you. Also, see if there's any reviews. Look up, see if anybody's graduated from there that has gone on to do great things or something in the field that you're interested in, if you have a field you're interested in. Anyway, that's the end of the article. But it just caught my eye because it seems so in line with so much that I'm seeing from the videos that I've done and other things that I've seen in the world these last couple of years with education, higher education especially. Is this philosophy of feels over reals, of putting the decision-making power of what equates to a good education into the hands of the students, rather than telling the students, this is how you think, and you need to apply these skills of critical thinking to the world, go off and do it, rather than telling them what to think, but also taking a step back to let the students educate you. I can't count how many times I've watched lectures or TEDx talks or something else where the teacher or the speaker or whatever else would say something to the effect of, I had to learn to stop to listen to my students because they have a perspective and experience that I just don't have. And I have to be humble, or something to that effect. It's like, yeah, that's what you do. Abrogate your responsibility as an educator and turn around and let the student tell you how things are. Because the student knows more than you do about the subject you're being paid to teach. That was I remember this from one of the very first episodes of Curriculum of Fear, where this lady told this story about how she was so freaked out over having to, teach To Kill a Mockingbird in her classroom. And because, racial language is used in that. And she wasn't sure how to deal with that, especially when there were kids in her class who were Black. And so she was standing up there and she's talking about how she's just freaking out. And some student in her class says, are you worried about not knowing what it's like to be a Black student here at this school? And she said, well, I guess so. And he says, well, sit down. Let me tell you something. So she sits down in the front row. And for the next 20 minutes or something, the student's standing up there teaching her about the experience of being Black in the school. And she says, and I'm quoting, she just sat there crying her white girl tears. And I'm like, you need to quit. You need to not be doing what your job title says you supposedly do. If you're going to give up your podium, if you're going to freak out about teaching kids a book when you're an English teacher, I mean, how do you get past that? If you have to read a book, if you read Shakespeare or something that has language that's either difficult or dense, or subject matter that might be, it might be on point for the era in which the story takes place, but it might be a little kooky today. Why can you not separate those things with your students? Why can't you talk to them like adults and say, hey, this book takes place in this time. I'm going to walk you through it. We'll discuss it, etc. If you can't be an adult as a teacher, you're not going to be anything other than an unwise student, I guess. Anyway, again, that's the end of the article. I'd like to know what you guys think about this kind of stuff. So I'll take some questions or look at some comments real quick over in the chat, and then we'll wrap this up. Because I didn't have a whole lot else to say beyond, the ribbing I've given this article. It's just that it struck me as familiar territory, given how many examples of progressive education I've gone through over the last 2 years. Let's see. Peter Silak, Hades 313. I remember some colleges were not only letting the students go to Trump protests, but actually encouraging them to. Yes, that was something similar in one of the videos I did, a TEDx talk, where a lady talked about how I think it was what was it? It was like the Michael Brown riots, I think, or protests. I think it was that. Anyway, um, a bunch of students had decided they're going to go off to this protest, and the faculty of this school didn't want to stand in the way of these kids getting involved. So, they just watched as the kids walked off towards this Black Lives Matter protest somewhere. No adult supervision, just see you guys later. Be heroes. Yeah, it's like, yeah, sure. Let your kids, teenagers and grade schoolers and such march off to a Black Lives Matter protest, because that's a safe environment with no adult supervision, no notice to the parents, permission slips or something. Yeah, it's not unusual. Apparently, it's not unusual. Killer or Kyler says, looks like these colleges are starting to reap what they've sown. I'm shocked, I tell you. Well, yeah, I mean, and that's a very basic question, a question that I would have thought, if you're going to be shelling out $63,000 a year to a college like Hampshire, as a parent, or even or hopefully as a student who's going to have to, shoulder on the debt of that if your parents aren't completely wealthy, one of the first questions you ask is, well, what can I do with a degree from this school? Tell me some of your success stories. Tell me about some of your graduates who have gone on to do great things, and what did they do? What path did they take, etc. I mean, let the buyer beware for sure. But when it comes to something as high an investment as this, as college, not only in your future, but just as a financial one, 63 grand a year. Where I sit, I don't know that many people who make $63,000 a year. So, let's see. Zero the Hero, Scribe Light. Did you ever see the movie Accepted? This article kind of reminded me of that. The name sounds familiar, but I don't think I've seen it. RJ Bansma, Scribe Light. Should these SJW agendas be eliminated from colleges? It's a difficult thing to say depending on what subject you're talking about. There can be a place for talking about these things if they're clearly marked, and we're not talking about insinuating social ideologies into subjects and into situations where they don't belong. The problem is that it seems from a lot of examples we've seen, like Evergreen State College was last year, the year before, where the administration basically just cowered in fear, literally and figuratively, of the student body to just let them run roughshod over them. If the administrations of these colleges actually practiced real education rather than promoting these socially just ideologies, or infusing their curriculums with activist notions and completely left-wing philosophies, maybe there'd be a chance. But, colleges, for the most part, run independently. They may take federal money, and as long as they don't break federal laws, they can still take federal money. If people want to go to these colleges, well, they can pay for it. And if they want to run themselves as not so secret factories for trying to produce activists, and people are willing to pay for it, you can't force them. I mean, short of showing some kind of dereliction or something, or maybe some kind of civil suit for fraud or something like that, I'm not quite sure how you stop it. Because ultimately it's going to be up to the students to decide for themselves, hopefully, what works for them and what doesn't. I would hope more people and more parents would take responsibility. And I'm not saying they don't. I don't have any studies in front of me, but given what we've seen in many colleges the last couple of years, the protests, the takeovers, the riots, the demands for, gender justice or racial equity and all this other stuff, or demanding the president step down because somebody drew a swastika in poop somewhere on a college campus. I don't know, man. I don't know. do your research before you go to a college. You know, whether you're a parent or you're a student, do your research. Make sure you know what you're looking for. Try to find out if it's worth the money you're going to be putting in. I guess is the only, you know, advice I can give, and I'm not much of an education expert. Tartanist, do you think they strip all colleges of federal funding until they can prove a decent GPA from a majority of at least 80% of the students? Well, you see, and then you get into the same situation as a lot of schools where some goal is set of you have to have this percentage passing your school in order to receive funding or to receive whatever. That can be a carrot to work with that particular stick. But the other thing you have to worry about then is the colleges lowering their standards to increase their graduation rates to meet that mark. How you monitor that while also sort of threatening them with cutoff of funds. Yeah, and it's also the thing of saying if once the government takes a hand, a threat like that to say, you're not allowed to teach things we don't approve of if you're a college. It doesn't matter what administration you're talking about. It doesn't matter what philosophy is being pushed in a college. Once the government starts making those kind of threats under that kind of auspice, I have a problem with that. You know, trying to have the government tell a institution of learning what it should or should not teach to that level is... Now, if somebody wants to go off to a school that teaches nonsense, they're free to do that. And as long as the school doesn't break any federal guidelines in the process, that's the market. That's our country. I don't want to have the country necessarily, or the government, I should say, dictating what can and cannot be taught in school, short of it somehow violating the law. Okay. Let's see. Jack Gunsky says, hey, it's Sunday. The stream is illegal. No, it's just not Lords of the Night stream. Point curation. I think I started following all of this social justice stuff in 2013, 2014. The Yale thing and Shapiro getting shut down put my focus on what the fuck was going on. The world has been terrifying since then. Yeah, my first sort of awakening to this stuff was just pre-Gamergate. Mr. Medicker's videos, the series called Tumblrisms, I came across just randomly one day. And watching them at the time, the first one I ever saw was Headmates. If you look up Tumblrisms Headmates, and when I watched that, I thought, this is some wacky fringe shit. And then he had one on white privilege. And then he had one on thin privilege, I think it was, or fat acceptance or something. And all of these things just sounded like complete, you know, wacky Looney Tune stuff to me until people in my real life started reciting back to me the very arguments and or conclusions that were cited in those videos. Real people, and not, you know, not up and coming, you know, stars in their eyes college students or something. Peers, people my own age, people who should have known better than to buy into such craziness. But yeah, it was a bucket of cold water, I tell you. I was out on a date at one point, and my date started telling me about my white privilege, and I was honestly speechless for about 5 minutes, and then I looked at her and I said, "So, do I have white privilege?" And she gives me this sort of roll eye thing, like, "Well, yeah." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well, I would hate to infect you with my white privilege by paying for your meal." You know, it's just, it was a bad scene. That was a short relationship. Let's see. Just a couple more comments, guys. I'm gonna wrap this up. I don't want to take too much time out of your day, or otherwise this is just sort of an impromptu thing. Jack Gunsky says, my awakening to social justice was James Randi. I watched his Nova special, and that led me to the Armored Skeptic, and the rest is history. Not so much social justice, but my real education in refining my critical thinking skills really came from Christopher Hitchens, and listening to the countless debates he had with religious figures during his God is Not Great book tour. And you can find most, if not all of them, online now. And I just listened to them in the background as I was doing schoolwork or something else. or my work. And I didn't agree with Hitchens on everything that he ever said about politics and everything else, but listening to his style and his process of working through, religious claims or arguing back to religious leaders and such like that, was really a wake up for me. Was really a sort of a watershed event in my personal evolution, and not in what I think, but how I think. That's the important part. The how, not the what. Christopher Hitchens never told me, or at least I never took from him, what to think about the world. I took from him how to think better about things that are put before me. At least I believe so. Others can be the judge. Rotten Corpse says, Scribe, thanks for the stream. They're nice to listen to while working out. Well, I'm glad you're getting healthy. Listen to me yabber. Point Curation, really good stream, Scribe. We need to watch the starting of it. Oh, we'll need to watch the starting of it. Yep. Well, it'll be here for posterity. And yeah. Oh, this is Kyle says, hey, if anyone is bored after this stream, I'll be streaming Bloodborne in a bit. This is Kyle. So if you're watching the chat right now, you can hover over his name. You can click the little 3-dot thing on the side and then, get the link to his channel. But let's see. And Tom of Gulf City says, both Hitchens brothers are amazing. Don't 100% agree with either, but the critical thinking from these guys was ace. Yeah, I've never been as enthused by Peter Hitchens' stuff. He just doesn't quite have that sort of roguish brigand temperament that his brother did. But yeah, Peter Hitchens is a really smart guy. I've seen him on a couple of Question Times and things like that, and he's really good too. But and Kyler says, or Killer, sorry, my nieces and nephews are college age, and I'm honestly scared for them. Okay, I'll divert slightly just before I close up. I won't say who, but I had someone ask me not too long ago about education for kids. Like, what do you think about public education and such? And it all depends on the school. It all depends on the curriculum, etc. I'm challenged to say definitively that it would be a bad thing to send your child to a public school, even if you knew there were social justice elements going on at that school. And the reason I say that is this. The unfortunate fact is, this is the world we live in now. This is how things are going. I don't think necessarily protecting yourself or your children from it is beneficial 100%. I think if you're keeping engaged with your kid, whether they're grade school or college age, and you're asking them about what they're learning, and you ask them some, on-point questions about what it is they're being taught and what they think about what they're being taught. If you keep engaged with your kids throughout their education, and instead of just leaving them to the moods of the teachers they have, I think they have a better chance to sort of figure things out for themselves. You have to have some faith that the kid's going to figure things out for themselves. It's just, we've all been teenagers at one point or another, trying to be coddled or routed into something without being given the opportunity to sort of learn our own lessons. I remember my dad, he read me chapter and verse one time on something stupid that I did, something very stupid. Looking back on it, it was a dumb idea. And he just, until he was blue in the face, telling me what I should have done, what I should do, etc., etc. And when he finally came to a pause point, in my precocious way as I was, and still am to a certain degree, I looked at him and said, Dad, you can tell me until the end of time what I should or should not do or how much I screwed that up. But until I do it, I won't know it, if you catch my meaning. So anyway, that's the thought. If you think it's profound, I've won. If you don't, I'm a moron. I'll leave that with you guys. Thank you so much for joining me for this special live stream edition of Curriculum of Fear. The playlist is on the channel if you want to see the past entries into it, which may give you more things to be concerned about. I can't tell you. And other than that, hope you guys have a good weekend. And I will talk to you on Monday on Lords of the Night. Take care.